about ready to start. While you're getting settled, I think a lot of you have seen that there's some questions, a questionnaire that's being sent out. If you don't mind taking a few minutes to answer those questions in that survey, that's put together by Professor Verna Delar, who's standing right there. Her Environment and Society class, everyone in that class, you want to raise your hand? So they put together a survey to find out what people's attitudes and prior knowledge is about energy issues around natural gas and alternative energy. So if you could take a few minutes to do that, that would be very helpful. And if you can return the pencils before you leave, then we won't get in trouble with the administrative assistant. That would be really good. So I'll give you another minute to finish those, and then we'll get started. Sure. So once you're done, Pat has volunteered to collect them, even though the students should be doing that. So one way or another, we'll get them back to the back table, and we really appreciate your taking the time to do that. That's helping them understand, how people perceive the environment is such a big focus of their class. All right, so I want to thank you all for coming tonight. As you all know, there's been a lot of consternation and issues and concerns about the proposed natural gas pipeline. The FERC hearing, I don't know, what was that, 4 weeks ago here, certainly heard a lot of people expressing a lot of upset and concerns about safety, water quality, wildlife habitat, property values, and a number of other very important on-the-ground pipeline issues. But the goal of this panel discussion is not to ignore those very serious direct impacts, but just to take kind of a bigger picture look at the situation, to think about, is natural gas a good energy source for the future of this region, of this state, of the country, of the world? What are the costs and benefits of this energy source, and what are perhaps some of the alternatives as well? We've asked our expert panelists to address these questions, and we're looking forward to a lively and civil discussion about these issues. So first I want to just go through what the structure of the event will be. So first, Clay Mithchell is going to give us a little background information. Some of the students are new to the topic, so he's going to try to bring them up to speed where probably a lot of you already are. And then each panelist is going to get a chance to speak for about 15 minutes. I'm going to signal to them when they have 2 minutes left, and then a 1-minute signal, and then I will do my best to gracefully cut them off. After that, the panelists will be asking each other questions for about 10 minutes or so. And after that, we'll take some written questions from the audience, and I'll read the questions. And if they're directed to the whole panel, that's fine. If they're directed to one person, that's fine as well. We'd like you to focus your questions on the big picture, and thinking about this potential energy source and the costs and benefits for the region, the state, and the whole world. And then we expect to wrap up the discussion at about 7:30. All right, so I would like to introduce our 3 panelists. They bring diverse skills and viewpoints to the discussion table. First, Curtis Cole is the Director of Business Development for Kinder Morgan, and in that role, he's responsible for developing and executing capital growth projects that leverage Kinder Morgan's existing footprint for the Tennessee gas pipeline system. Mr. Cole has more than 29 years of energy experience in the natural gas and electric industries. He received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Iowa and earned his Master of Science in Financial Markets and Trading from the Stewart School of Business in Chicago. And Clay Mithchell, on the end here, holds a PhD in Natural Resources and Environmental Studies from the University of New Hampshire, as well as a law degree from Vermont Law School. He's a partner in Revolution Energy, LLC, a private company which advances alternate energy solutions and energy conservation. The primary service of this company is to help clients understand their energy usage and their impact on, its impact on their carbon footprint. Revolution Energy has worked with many different partners to help finance and install solar photovoltaic arrays. Finally, in the middle, we have David Solomon, who's a staff writer and reporter with the New Hampshire Union Leader and Sunday News, specializing in energy, business, and politics. He's a former executive editor of the National Telegraph and the Portsmouth Herald. He writes regularly about energy issues in his column Power Plays. In 2014, he won first place in the business writing category from the New Hampshire Press Association. So we're very fortunate to have a very distinguished group of speakers. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Clay.
Good evening. So I'm going to try and compress an entire semester into 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Energy markets. This is what we're talking about. We are talking about how we use energy and the choices we make. I know that we're obviously going to be talking about, indirectly or not, an individual pipeline, but you have to understand that the context or the fabric that we're dealing with has been developing over 100 years. We have needed to deploy infrastructure to deliver energy in places where risky investments were not going to be done unless they were backed by the government. We required utilities to be able to deliver heating fuels and electricity, and in order to do that, they had to invest trillions of dollars. The only way we could do that is giving them monopoly status. And we are starting to unravel that a little bit, but we're stuck. And what I want to talk about is, that context, because what I see in my work and in my academics is the opportunity to move forward, and we have not exercised that opportunity. If you've watched The Daily Show, every once in a while they have a funny thing about fossil fuels where they have every president all the way back to Lyndon Johnson saying we need to get off foreign oil. Every single one, and nobody has really taken any action. We are dealing with a system that is essentially broken, and I understand the frustration associated with individual projects, but until we fix the system, this is what we are going to be dealing with. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I want you to channel your energy into an opportunity to really look at this from a global perspective. Because if you're not aware of what's going on right now in New Hampshire, there is a battle for the fight of the solar industry. If you're not aware of that, you need to be aware of it. We have a cap on the amount of solar photovoltaics that can be connected to our grid. And I know I'm talking about electricity, but this is part of the context. These anecdotes will give you the color of what we're dealing with. That cap is limited at 50 megawatts. What does that mean? It's 1% of the load. We're not allowed to go above 1% of the load in our state. In Massachusetts, that cap is 1,600 megawatts. We're 50, Massachusetts is 1,600 megawatts. Maine, no cap. Vermont, no cap. We're at 1%, and we're having to argue about getting it up to 1.5%. There needs to be a lot more focus on this whole picture and this whole context, because if we don't find a way to get other alternative forms of energy on the grid, we're going to be dealing with the only forms that we're allowed to put on. And I think that the development of that has led to where we are today. Not necessarily with this specific project, but you have to understand how our utilities are protected as monopolies, how that creates laziness, and how we have not figured out a proper way to compensate them. We force utilities to do the things we do. We pay them based on the amount of power they sell. So what do you want to do when you're a business and you make money off what you sell? You need to sell more. So what else do? Well, we tell the utilities that they have to run energy efficiency programs. So we tell them, you have to make money by selling more power, and then we want you to also figure out how to sell less power. That sounds stupid because it is. And that's how we do things. And this is the kind of broken system that we're dealing with. And I really want to try and elevate the discussion to this level so that we can start challenging our government and ask for leadership and try and get this done. We have studied everything in New Hampshire. When we buy energy in New Hampshire, we export 2/3 of our dollars immediately from the state, most of it even out of the country. And that is an economic argument that we need to try and get domestic clean sources in the state. But I can assure you that at 1%, that's a very slow moving process. So this is what's driving this, how we market and buy energy. There are markets related to where we buy things, what are the projects, what are the materials, what's the quantity, how do we transmit it. There are markets on when we buy things, whether it's hourly, daily, yearly. We have markets that are set up to structure the purchase of energy. All of these markets are highly regulated. We have markets for what we buy, gas, electricity. The markets also set how much we pay, and that's way too complicated for me to get into today. We are also limited by who can buy at these markets, whether it's retail or wholesale. We have markets that are driven by administrative regulation. We also are starting to develop a competitive market. If you pay an electric bill, you probably received a letter from some of these competitive suppliers who are buying market energy and trying to sell it to you at a cheaper rate. So we're starting to unwind a little bit this concept that we have one utility doing everything, and as we unwind that, we go through growing pains. And right now, we're dealing with that. This is kind of a snapshot. I'm not going to explain it because I barely understand it myself, and it certainly is one of those things that would take a couple of weeks in a class. This is how the gas market works. Trading, day ahead, the timing, everything has to be run precisely, and it has to be calculated incredibly precisely in order to ensure that the gas flows at the appropriate time. It is a very complex system that is going to be very difficult to unwind. These are commodities. One of the interesting reports that have been dealt with in the past and why we deal so much with fossil fuels is that the nature of our users have forced us to create these markets. And the nature that we have always assumed is that people have a limited amount of storage. And I would question that. I mean, if you haven't watched Elon Musk's announcement for the Powerwall, I invite you to please watch it. There is going to be storage, and that will be a game changer, particularly with renewable energy. The substitutions are limited in the types of energy we use, and that is also a long-standing mythology that is ready to be challenged. It is now cost-effective to install solar over being connected to the grid. Of course, there's arguments about subsidies and incentives and things like that, but I would submit to you, based on the work that I have done, that when you consider the lifetime output of a solar array, it is cheaper than connecting to the grid. Finally, we demand that our lights turn on when we flip the switch. And that is a very complicated thing to do. Demand is instantaneous, the grid has to respond, and in order to do that, we have to have a diverse set of technologies and capabilities put on that grid. So that is the context for the generation of energy. Let's talk a little bit about natural gas law. The Natural Gas Act, cleverly named, controls natural gas. The jurisdiction resides in FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They regulate who sells gas, who buys gas, and who transports gas between the states. And that last statement is how it works. There's one section, Section 7. They will issue a certificate of public convenience and necessity, which has been litigated 1,000 times, and will, at that point, issue a permit to allow the construction of a natural gas pipeline. This is a map of the production of natural gas in the United States. Just let you watch that. Where do we get natural gas? We get natural gas from fracking right now. Fracking originated in the quest for releasing water in wells. And now it has been moved over to increase the production in oil and natural gas wells. We have a lot of gas in this country, and this is what our extraction areas look like. Each of those yellow dots is a wellhead in Oklahoma. What it doesn't show is this: the laterals that are associated with each of those wellheads. This is how we extract natural gas in the United States. This is what we are doing to our country. This is the transportation system, the pipelines. You know, as we've heard, we're in the Northeast. We don't have a lot of natural gas, so the FERC and other energy planners have decided to look at expanding pipelines to our part of the country. So what is natural gas? Methane. Primarily, it's colorless, it's odorless, it only stinks because you put something in it so that people know when it's being released. It burns, and it burns like crazy. It can be used as a liquid or a gas. It can be stored and transported in the same way. It's a very useful fuel. Here's some terms that'll help you. We speak about natural gas in terms of therms. A therm is 100,000 BTUs, or 100 cubic feet. 1,000 cubic feet, or 10 therms, is about how much you need to heat a house for 4 days. You can also generate about 100 kilowatt hours from that same amount of natural gas. In electricity, we talk in terms of watts or kilowatts. That's an amount of electricity at an instantaneous point. I used to use hairdryers, but I realized that not everybody uses hairdryers, so I now use Keurigs. When you turn on a Keurig, you need 1.5 kilowatts to heat up your coffee. Over time, you use kilowatts in hours, and that is how we bill electricity. So if that Keurig was running for an hour, you would have to pay 1.5 kilowatt hours. An average, actually a Keurig, when it sits still, only uses about 0.67 kilowatt hours. 1,000 kilowatts equals a megawatt, and 1,000 megawatts equals a gigawatt. Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant is 1.6 gigawatts of output capacity. So, what is the deal? The deal is that there are benefits to natural gas. It is cleaner than oil and coal. The supply seems plentiful and it seems domestic. It is a good baseload supply of power. We can turn plants on almost immediately, start them up, and start generating electricity. Whereas for a coal plant, it takes about a day. It takes about a day to turn it on, it takes about a day to turn it off, and a natural gas plant can run. This is good for renewable energy. Renewable energy is intermittent. When the wind blows, when the sun shines, when the water flows, there has to be a backup for that because, as I said, we demand power when we need it. We need a base load, and so the idea that we have natural gas available to provide that base load for some people will enhance the opportunity for expanding renewable energy options. The other is, it is a good source of fuel for combined heat and power. I'll explain that in a second. The obvious concerns are, I don't even need to tell you, people are concerned about fracking and the extraction of natural gas, and people are concerned that it's still a fossil fuel. This bottom slide shows a more policy-based concern. The blue is the ISO New England, which is our region, was our power supply and what we were based on. In 2000, 15% of our energy came from natural gas, and in 2013, 46% came from natural gas. So the question is, how much do we as a region want to have natural gas provide our electricity? You'll see the renewables has jumped from 13 to 14%. And I would submit to you that that's as much as a issue of our policy regimes and the political will to install renewables as anything else. And that's what frustrates me. Let me talk about combined heat and power because I think that's one that's off. This is a schematic of the University of New Hampshire cogen plant. We burn natural gas and landfill gas. We pipe in landfill gas from the 35 miles away from the turnkey landfill. But we capture as much gas as we possibly can, bring it to the UNH campus, put it in a turbine, and we create electricity for campus. We capture that heat off that turbine cycle and heat our campus. We also capture that heat and we create cooling through a process called absorption chilling. So we have a plant that runs close to 85 or 90% efficiency. And when we burn landfill gas, we're considered a renewable source. When the landfill gas fluctuates, we have to supplement with natural gas. And interestingly enough, the models for the amount of methane gas that we were going to get from the landfill have shown are a little bit wrong. Too many people are composting, oddly enough, so we're not getting biologics in the landfill, and we're not getting enough landfill gas to bring into our cogen plant. In addition, the economic downturn has reduced the amount of waste that's gone into the landfill. So UNH we've had to up our usage of natural gas to run our plant. Now, the interesting thing is, because we can use the waste heat from the turbine, we don't have to buy oil to heat our campus. And so, from an objective standpoint, it's a very efficient and clean way to generate energy for the campus. We don't have any other types of fuel available. There's no biofuels out there. There's no cost-competitive algae-based fuels yet available for us to put in our turbine. We're using as much landfill gas as we possibly can. It's very hard to tell people to stop composting, so we're just dealing with it. And so we have to go to natural gas. The other thing that we fail to do, and this is a regulatory failure of monolithic proportions, this is Newington. The malls, these are the malls. This is Pease Air Force Base. We have this is a power plant, this is a power plant, this is a power plant, Newington has a lot of power plants. What we do with all the waste heat from those power plants is we put it right here in this river to warm it up, instead of sending it over to all these buildings over here that need heat through a lot of times. There's people over here, there's malls, there's Best Buys, there's your ubiquitous 14 different steakhouses. I don't know who did that. There's Fridays, Ruby Tuesdays. All these people need heat, including the Pease Air Force Base. We could displace a significant amount of fossil fuels to heat buildings if we just captured that heat and trucked it less than a half a mile, but we don't do that. So there's, it's a more complex question than I think people understand. And one of the failures I believe is driving this is a failure in planning and a failure in leadership. Talking about these issues in different ways is something that's important, and it's something that I hope that we can get to tonight. That is your primer on natural gas and a little bit of energy and a little bit of electricity. And I don't want to take up a lot of time talking. I think that our discussion will get into the things that I want to say. But if it doesn't, I will certainly grab the, what is this called? I'm blanking. Podium. I will grab the podium. And I will begin talking more about that kind of thing. But I hope that I've opened your eyes to some of the reasons that we are deploying a significant amount of natural gas, some of the benefits that I think we need to objectively acknowledge when we talk about it at a real high level. And I hope that I've given you some insight into what I'm going to tell you at the end, in that, if your frustration over this particular situation needs to be challenged to a higher level, so that we can start talking about leadership in energy policy that really makes sense for the state, and that we get some kind of energy policy at the federal level, but none of us are going to be holding our breaths for very long for that. Anyway, that is the encouraging comments I had to make to open up, so I will yield the podium to my next guest.